Welcome to the ManageIQ Sprint 136 review. So I will present the overview. Harpreet will give us an update on the UI, Adam on the providers, Joe on the platform, and Jason on the developer. So for this sprint 136, we had an uptick in the number of pull requests opened, as well as merged. And total PRs open is going down, which is good. We don't want too many remaining open and unattended to. Moving in the right direction again. In terms of pull requests merged by label, seems like we had more enhancements than bugs this round. Even the last round we had it the other way around. And as we stabilize Yansa, we expect that number to kind of reverse back to having fewer enhancements and many more bug fixes. In terms of the repo health, just have a chart. Still working on how to make this more consumable. And what else? Oh, on the community side, on the website, there is a new sprints page with a link there. And you can actually get the full details for each sprint, every pull request, open, merged, closed, as well as each issue open, merged, open, closed. And for the sprint 136 details, you could just go to that link right there to actually see the pull request behind what we're talking about here today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Harpreet for the UI.
Thanks, Oleg. Hello, everyone. Can you go back to the previous slide? Okay. Hello, everyone. So we had total of 24 PRs merged during the sprint. Out of that, 12 were bug fixes and 9 enhancements. There's a list of main bug fixes and enhancements listed here that can be accessed at later time. And I have a few slides to go over the recent enhancements. So let's go to the next slide, please. There were some major changes made to configuration management screen. Here in the screenshot, you can see the changes that were made to the navigation menu items. So previously we had under configuration main menu item, we had only one item management, which had on the single screen, we had configuration manager providers, profiles, and configured systems. But now with these changes, we have 3 menu items under configuration, each for their own screens. So next slide, please. Here you can see the older version of Configuration Management Explorer with the tree on the left side with a list of providers and summary screen on the right. Had the summary screen on the right side shows the item from the selected item from the tree. Next slide, please. So here on the newer version of Configuration Manager providers, there's no trees on the left side. It shows filters on the left, as you can see on some of the other screens in the UI, like hosts and providers list view screens. And on the summary screen of our configuration profiles, you can see the relationship links back to the provider and configured systems. Next slide, please. You should also see some changes and additional features in the product features tree. Also, new entries in the start page dropdown on user settings screen for the new submenus. And these changes make configuration manager provider area pluggable now. Next slide, please. And on the API side, service retirement was extended to have ability to retire one or more services in future. As you can see, I have a sample API command here that retires a selected service after 5 days. And in the output of that command, you can see a message that the service has been scheduled to retire on May 17th, along with the warning value information that was passed in. Next slide, please. And support for pagination, ordering, and filtering was added to report results and also to the results subcollections. I have a sample API command here that I ran to get a list of 5 results of a saved report sorted by name in ascending order. In the output, it shows 5 records from the second page as I had passed in offset value as 5, along with the total page count and total count information. That is all I have for the UI.
Thanks, Harpreet. So this is a big sprint for providers. We'll start with some of the more mundane bug fixes. On the vSphere side, we fixed a bug where if there was a change to a distributed port group, like if you changed the name, it wasn't getting saved to VMDB. And that has to do with the way that port groups are children of switches in VMDB, but in vSphere, they're a top-level collection. So we fixed that up on that side. On Google Cloud, we fixed a bug where an invalid load balancer child attribute was causing the whole network manager refresh to fail. So there's a problem with permissions not being able to get to an instance from the load balancer. It was failing with permissions error. So now we just catch that error and skip that load balancer and continue with the rest of the refresh. On the Redfish side, David fixed an issue where customization templates weren't being loaded in the physical server provisioning form. And Smart State, Jerry fixed an issue that was preventing drive letters from being properly appended to Windows paths on Smart State. Next slide. So on the container side for Kubernetes and Openshift, support for targeted refresh was completed in this sprint for both the Kubernetes and the Openshift providers. So what this is using Kubernetes watches, which is a way of subscribing to changes made to the Kubernetes cluster. So it's a lot like the update-driven refresh that we did for VMware a while back. So Kubernetes will let you know when different entities change. So without having to go out and do a full refresh to figure out what changed, you can actually subscribe to targeted changes to the different entities. So on startup, the refresh worker will perform a full refresh and figure out the different refresh resource versions, and then threads for each of the entities that we subscribe to are started to collect notices. Those notices are then put on an internal queue, and we can save just that one or set of small changes as opposed to trying to save everything. So this is way more efficient than previously, which was an event was caught, a full refresh was put on the queue, and the refresh worker went out and collected everything and saved everything, possibly if only like the name of a pod was changed. So now we'll save just the one thing that changed. And users can still force a manual refresh. So if you go to the provider page and you say refresh relationships and power states, we'll bring the watch threads down, do a full refresh, and start them up again. And there's the documentation for Kubernetes if you're interested in how watches work. And next slide, and we'll do a quick demo here. So here we have our OpenShift 4 cluster. You can see we have 58 projects. And let's go and create a new project. And then let's go over, so this is the log for the refresh worker. So let's create that new project, and we should see the notices that are caught. So we log, there's one namespace notice, and then save inventory for just that one notice, and then a flurry of other changes. But the key thing is we parse just that one. And you can see we have 59 projects now. So if we go into the project list and go and find that new project, you can see there's no resources there because we just created it. So if we go over and now deploy a new app, is a helpful Ruby app that we can deploy. So you see we have nothing over in the refresh logs. We just deploy the app, and now we get a ton of notices about build pods being spun up and images and services being created. And so if we go over and refresh this page, now without having done a full refresh, we have containers, images, services, etc. Everything's linked up properly. So that it's way more effective than going out and getting information about all of the inventory on the cluster just because one app was deployed. And that's it for that. Next slide. And so the big news is we have a new provider that has been contributed to the ManageIQ community by a group of awesome developers from the Netherlands working for the KPN telecom company. It is the VMware NSXT provider, which is VMware's software-defined networking. So it was originally NSXV, which was specific to a single vSphere. NSXT is an advancement of that, which is a more full-featured general software-defined networking product. So the provider is a standalone network manager similar to the Nuage provider, and the repos there has been transferred over. And next slide, we'll have a short demonstration and presentation by Everett. There should be some audio over this, Oleg. I don't know if you're hearing that.
Hang on, let me try it again.
Hi, my name is Even Mulder and I work for KPN in the Netherlands. We have been using ManageIQ for some years now, and we wanted to add some SDN capabilities to our hypervisor stack running on VMware. For this SDN solution, we decided to use VMware NSXT. Because there is no provider available for NSXT, we decided to develop a network provider using the provider plugin model. I would like to show some capabilities of the NSXT provider running in our lab environment. When opening the Network tab, the user is presented with the NSXT dashboard, providing an overview of the available networks, security groups, policies, and linked VMs available for the current tenant. From the cloud networks, we can view a list of available networks and create a new cloud network as well. In our case, when creating a network, we create the subnet as well. The user can provide a name, a description, the size for the subnet, and in our specific case, also the security zone. When the form is submitted, we trigger an Ansible deployment, creating the network, reserving an IP range, and creating the subnet for the network. When the network is created, a VM can be configured to use this network. But all communication is denied by default in our setup. To allow for communication, network policies must be created by setting up rules from and to security groups. A security group can contain a number of VMs. In the security groups overview, we can manage security groups. We create a new security group by providing the name, description, and optionally add existing VMs to the security group. After submitting the request, the security group is created and becomes visible in the list of security groups. Security groups can be used as a source or a destination for a security policy rule. A security policy is a collection of one or more security policy rules. We can add a security policy rule to an existing security policy, or we can create a new security policy. In this case, we create a new security policy providing a name and description. Once created, we can create a new policy rule by adding security policy rules to a security policy. For a security policy rule, we specify a name, description, the source security group, and a destination security group, and a number of network services. A network service specifies the type of traffic that will be allowed. In our sample, we allow for FTP, HTTP, and HTTPS traffic from security group A to security group B. When the security policy rule is created for the security policy, The security policy rule is visible in the security policy summary. The network topology view gives the tenant an overview of the NSXT network components like the router, the subnets, the networks, and the security groups, and the connected VMs. With this overview, I'd like to end the demo. I want to thank everyone who made this possible. The entire team, especially Rutger and Adam, for also adding the provider to ManageQ.
All right, thanks so much, Everett. That was awesome, and also Rutger for developing and contributing the provider. That was really awesome to see. And that's it for the provider slides. Over to Joe.
Very impressive, Adam. Very good. Okay, in the platform space this sprint, there were 69 PRs that were merged, and we'll do an overview. Starting with enhancements, NIC improved the operation of external authentication for running Codified Managed IQ on Kubernetes. David wrapped up a new enhancement that will track and act on failed login attempts. And Alberto and I paired up to move the OpenID Connect API authentication into Apache configuration. This will make the configuration file a little more complicated, but there's an update to the appliance console CLI that will help automate that. For bugs, one was addressed by fixing the wording for controlling application database failover monitoring that was incorrectly labeled configure versus controlling. Another bug was addressed where adding credentials of a Rev physical host was failing with an error unexpected response return from system. You see that error, that should be fixed. There was a bug that was causing errors when setting up a dummy test database. It was addressed by adding a username and password back to the dummy apps database YAML. And another was addressed that was producing errors in saved reports when using Eventchuck database that was migrated to a Yansa release. Next slide, please. And the Ruby on Rails upgrade effort continued the sprint with a few more improvements. We'll go through them all. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. There we go. And lastly, there's an ongoing effort to use RPMs inside of the appliance and images to improve the update process. Although this isn't ready yet, here's a list of some of the more interesting PRs being contributed to move this upward forward. There's quite a bit of work being done here, so I thought it would be worth mentioning, even though it's not ready yet this sprint. A lot of work was contributed this sprint. That's it for the platform space. On to Jason and some information about the developer side.
Okay, so first off, we have a new repo, container HTTPD and init. Nick built this repository based on the container HTTPD repository. And what we've done there is in the codified world, running HTTPD, some of the auth strategies need systemd, and for that you need privileged. And we don't always want privileged necessary for managed IQ deployments. So container HTTPD now only does non-systemd based auth, and the full-blown auth is now in container HTTPD init. Eventually, the operator will be able to switch between those two and pick the right one based on the external authentication that's defined. Second, Oleg mentioned in the community, but we have this manageiq.org/sprints page with lots of details, and you can drill in onto merged PRs, which is really useful to know when something was merged, or go back in time and see what was done in a particular sprint. And last, on the Travis side, some of our repos were still using travisci.org. All the repos have now been transferred to travisci.com. So the only thing left, I think, is we have to go in and clean up some of the readmes in the various repos to point to travisci.com. But if you go to org, it should give you a little, page that says it has been migrated to .com. And that's it for me.
All right, so I want to thank everyone involved in bringing the sprint together. Special thanks to Everett and his team on getting the NSXT provider into ManageIQ. The demo was really enlightening. And yeah, we'll be back in 2 weeks to talk about Sprint 137. Thank you very much, everyone.